Hi, this is Janae Coleman-Cubero, and today I am going to tell you about the American Revolution and its impact on Native American culture and its people, too. But before I begin, I'd like to apologize in advance that some of the words mentioned are going to be hard to say for me, so I apologize in advance for screwing them up. Anyway, with Robert A.M. Stern's Museum of the American Revolution, there needs to be an exhibit to be a part of it. So why not the Native Americans? They have a very interesting history, and it is no different with their involvement in the American Revolution. And for the focus, I have chosen three tribes: the Lenni Lenape, the Cherokee, and the Oneida. The first I'd like to start is the Lenni Lenape. To start, there is the Moravian churches that were developed in the 1770s by pacifist missionaries who settled in Ohio, and with that they made villages, mainly the Schönbrunn, Gnadenhutten, and Lichtenau. And with the missionaries being peace-loving people, they inspired the Christian Lenape under Chief White Eyes to be neutral in the revolution, especially as the Moravian churches at the time were headed by Reverend David Seisberger. In 1781, though, the British authorities had ordered the Christian Delawares to abandon their current villages and relocate in northern Ohio along the Sandusky River. But their new home was having a food shortage during the winter, and so the Delaware Indians were forced to return to villages like Nuttenhutton in March of 1782. The reason why I included this in the exhibit is to show that Christian Lenapes were housed there as non-Christian Lenapes sided with Britain. And it showed how not everyone wanted to fight, no matter where they came from. And with the Lenape returning to Nuttenhutton, it foreshadowed a certain massacre that I will speak about shortly. But first there was the Treaty of the Delawares, which was signed on September 17th, 1778 at Fort Pitt, which was the first treaty being signed after the Declaration of Independence. With the Lenape representatives, there was Chief White Eyes, John Kilbuck, Jr., and Captain Pipe. For the American representatives, there was Andre and Thomas Lewis of Virginia. The treaty was made to counteract the opposing Loyalist sides represented by Simon Girty, Matthew Elliott, and Alexander McKee, who were understandably ticked off with the Squaw campaign, which had women and children from certain tribes attacked. Yet, with the treaty, it contained 6 articles beginning with a mutual pledge to forgive and forget past transgressions against one another and pledges of perpetual peace. As a result, Congress were allowed to pass through the Delaware Territory when conducting military operations against the British, requiring Delaware warriors to assist the Americans when possible, and establishing an asymmetrical economic relationship. As for the Lenape, they had gotten a fort for security and were provided goods by the Americans. And because of this treaty, there was even talk of a Delaware-led 14th state. The reason for the inclusion of the exhibit was to show how America was ready to be a sovereign nation, as they were already writing treaties and didn't without even asking Britain's permission. And it sought to replace the revenge killings with trials when crimes were committed against either Americans or the Delaware. And it would have allowed the Lenape independence from Loyalist tribes and held out the possibility of joining the United States as an equal sovereign nation or state, especially with the indigenous people coming close to their own state. And with the Treaty of the Delawares, there was Fort Lawrence, which was built in December of 1778 and supervised by William Crawford. And the name was given after Henry Lawrence, the Continental Congress president. And it did its job as to protect the Lenape people from enemy attacks. However, it was abandoned in 1782. So why include it? It showed the Congress had tried to keep their word and protected the Lenape from any more enemies than they already had at the time. However, there was certain exceptions, such as the Nutton Massacre, which took place in March of 1782. And led by Captain David Williamson, Pennsylvania militiamen went to attack the Lenape as revenge for recent attacks on their people. Yet the Lenape were innocent in those supposed crimes, as one, they were already peace-loving people and would not want to harm a fly, and two, they had just gotten back from the Sandusky River area, which were at the time of the certain attacks that had taken place. Nevertheless, the militia had taken men and women in separate cabins overnight and took a vote to kill them. And even though all Lenape did was sang and prayed during the night of their captivity, 96 Christian Lenapes were killed, 28 men, 29 women, and 39 children, with only 2 survivors. And from this, Nutton was never repaired. The reason to include this is to remember the tragedy and its victims, and this horrific event had also led to other indigenous tribes to turn away from America in favor of Britain, which also comes to show that war is not pretty, especially with this in mind. But there is the Cherokee tribe to talk about. First, we have the statue of Dragon Canoe, who sided with Britain in order to, mainly because of the land security, and he opposed the colonists, as he knew that like if America wins, that'll mean less land for everyone else. It was probably also the reason why he disagreed with the 1775 Treaty of the Sycamore Shoals. Yet despite British attempts to restrain them, in July 1776, a force of 700 Cherokee under Dragon Canoe had attacked 2 U.S.-held forts in North Carolina. Yet both assaults failed, and the tribes retreated in disgrace. The reason to include this is that it takes a look at a Native American who was not siding with America, but rather Britain, and also it shows a Native American who would do anything and fight for his land, and not just make treaties with everyone else. But with the losses, the battles ushered a series of attacks by Cherokee, Creek, and Choctaw in frontier towns, eliciting a vigorous response by militia and regulars of the southern states during September and October. The next, there is the 1773 Treaty of Augusta, which involved the Cherokee and the Creek tribes with documents ceded more than dozens of tribal acres in Georgia to relieve a seemingly hopeless Indian indebtedness to white traders. And the reason to include this was to serve as one of the many treaties signed by the Cherokee tribe, who did what was possible to stay out of debt, understandably, but it was also one of the ways the Cherokee lost some of their land. Another treaty that did this was the Treaty of the Sycamore Shells, which was signed in March of 1775, and it was an agreement between the Cherokee and the Transylvania Land Company, with negotiators being Judge Richard Henderson and Little Carpenter. This was made to persuade the Cherokee tribe to sell an enormous tract of land in central Kentucky, and even though it went against both the laws of Britain and America. Still, Brown and the Watauga River had transferred ownership of lease rights to the white settlers. So why include it? Important to the history of the Tennessee, basically, as the treaty transferred the area between the Ohio River and the headwaters of the streams flowing into the Kentucky and Cumberland rivers, central Kentucky and north and central Tennessee to the Transylvania Land Company for 10,000 British pounds for trading goods. Meanwhile, with Dragon Canoe being Little Carpenter's son, he hated the settlement and took revenge later on, as we have seen earlier. Still, the treaty had eventually become the basis for the white takeover of that area. So in short, the Cherokee had lost both lands in Georgia and then in Tennessee. Meanwhile, there is the Oneida people. The first we'll talk about is not really a Native American, but rather a white missionary by the name of Reverend Samuel Kirkland, who was behind the American and Oneida Alliance. As along with tending to his religious work, he had also become a counselor and mediator in their local disputes, and had aligned his ministry with a Boston-based religious commission, which drew the Oneida people closer to the Bostonian revolutionaries. And even though Britain had warned the tribes people to stay away from the rebels, the United people had a different view. They had liked Kirtland. He seemed like a pretty good guy, and they did not want to listen to Britain, which in turn led them to side with America. And that's to show that some religious leaders were good at the time. And with them, the tribes siding with America, there was the Battle of Oriskany, that was set in August of 1777, with 60 Oneida scouts and 800 militiamen led by General Herkimer versus 100 Loyalists and 400 Mohawks on the side of Britain, led by Colonel Barry St. Leger and Sir John Johnson. Chief Hunt Henry, who was of the Oneida people, had killed 9 of the enemies, with Herkimer entering his lead and dying days later. In the end, the Americans had 385 dead and 80 harmed or captured. The Loyalists had 7 dead and 21 injured, and the indigenous Loyalists had 65 either dead or wounded. And during the latter stages of the Burgoyne campaign, the United provided 150 men to General Horatio Gates' army, and this group was successful in harassing British sentry posts and foraging parties. This was important as this was one of the few battles of the Revolution where only North Americans had participated in, and also showed that the Native Americans had fought in combat during the war. And speaking of war, Washington had gone with his men to the Valley Forge in 1777 to 1778. But to cook for him and the troops was Polly Cooper, who was an Oneida woman who, as tradition would have it, had walked several hundred miles from her home in central New York to Valley Forge in the cruel winter to help feed General George Washington's starving troops, especially since he had joined the 50 Oneida men to accompany the Patriots. Meanwhile, she may have also taught the soldiers how to cook white corn also. And there are also two stories about her, both involving Martha Washington giving her a shawl when she refused payment, yet the payment either came from George or from the army. It's a mixed bag. But still, the reason why it's included is because it gives an influence that helped the 1770 Congress remember the Oneida's assistance. And it also served as one of the many women who took part in America's independence. For Stern's museum, it is important to include the Native Americans in their history, as not many people are aware of their struggles either from the past or even the present. And also, people can learn how things became what they are, such as how some of the land the Native Americans had were lost, and it also showed important individuals that people may not have even known before. And it also could be a good way to remember the deceased, especially those who had died to horrible deaths, like in the Nanhadu massacre. And with this exhibit, it gives a good part in the American Revolution and its independence. And here are the works cited links, and that is it.